Ring the imaginary bell, tell all of the colonists horror movies are consistently topping the box office. This is happening in an unprecedented manner. Backrooms, Obsession, Iron Lung, all indie horror movies that are competing directly with big studio IPs and even each other. This isn't some random stroke of luck, but a campaign that has been in the works for more than 20 years unintentionally. A culture nurtured by the internet, YouTube, and its creators has finally grown into a force to be reckoned with within mainstream media. How did this even happen? How did this even start? In this video, I'm going to detail the timeline of events and my interpretation as to why these stories are finally making it onto the big screen and succeeding. A beautiful butterfly effect that has the ability to change the movie industry forever. My name is HugoIsHorrible, and welcome to the Blair Witch effect. How the internet shaped modern horror. The Blair Witch Project was a movie released in 1999 to incredibly great success. Yes, I know I used two positives in the same sentence, don't get on me for that. In its opening weekend, it placed second in the box office, losing first to one of those, classic 90s rom-coms. It honestly didn't even matter that it placed second because this movie had done something that no other movie in the horror genre has done. On a budget of at most $750,000, it grossed $248 million. That's over like a 330% ROI. The Blair Witch Project is the original diamond in the rough. A true trailblazer that shaped how the horror genre would evolve as time passed. Many of my favorite horror movies such as Hell House LLC, Paranormal Activity, Wreck were all a direct consequence of this movie being so successful. But why was it so popular? Why was it so influential? This movie popularized the found footage technique originally used in the movie Cannibal Holocaust. If you haven't seen the Blair Witch Project, the movie is essentially prefaced with the fact that saying that the footage that you're about to see was completely found in the woods. It wasn't recorded for the movie specifically, it was just footage that somebody had managed to stumble upon. The entire movie then proceeds to be filmed on a handheld, giving that movie that wonderful amateur feeling that we've grown to recognize with found footage films. It also gave the audience a horrid feeling. The feeling that this actually happened. The feeling that we shouldn't be watching this. This format served as almost of a wake-up call for young filmmakers. They realized that you don't need a fancy studio or equipment to make movies. All you needed was a home video camera, some creativity, and a dream. At a point where it had been largely inaccessible to most, the internet made recording and editing softwares just a download away. But in terms of the Blair Witch Project, the internet wasn't just used as a way to get software, it was used as the main marketing campaign for the movie. Recall what I said about the emotions that the movie invigorated inside of the audience. Specifically those that made him believe that it was real. This idea was only further pushed by its marketing. Before the movie released, a website known as www.blairwitch.com was uploaded detailing the mythos, the filmmakers, the legacy, and the aftermath of, you guessed it, the Blair Witch. As you click through this website, you will learn of the mythos and the legend of the Blair Witch, alongside the three young filmmakers that were making the documentary in order to uncover its secrets. On the same website, you learned of these three students that went missing while filming, and the eventual search party that followed. These students were never found again. In the age of the young internet, this website was an absolute smash hit with over 160 million visits. It further pushed the narrative that the events of this movie were actually factual. Alongside this, during screenings, they would pass out flyers asking any of the audience members to provide information on the missing filmmakers. What was even crazier is that on the IMDb page, it listed these three young filmmakers as either missing or presumed dead for the first year that the movie was showing. This is what I would argue is the key factor in the movie's success. Many consider this the first viral movie, and this beautiful blend of horror and the internet would be the reason why. A new generation inspired, and a new medium to explore, would be the first domino to fall in this long game. Slender Man is a name that needs no introduction. An internet horror icon that was simply one glance you'd be able to recognize. The origins of Slender Man begin on an internet forum on the Something Awful website, which was a website that would consistently hold contests for their users to submit their work. On June 10th, 2009, the Something Awful website would ask its users to submit paranormal images. Obviously, with this vague description, it allowed their users to be creative. Aside from the usual ghosts, ghouls, and goblins, these following images were uploaded to the website with these captions. One of the two recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken the day which 14 children vanished and for what is referred to as Slender Man. Deformity cited as filmed effects by officials. Fire at the library occurred 1 week later. Actual phonograph confiscated as evidence. 1986. Photographer Mary Thomas, missing since June 13th, 1986. We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them. But its persistent silent and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time. 1983. Photographer unknown. Presumed dead. These images posted by Eric Knudsen are the first known mention of Slender Man, and the internet loved him. They loved him so much that not even 10 days later, which is still honestly insane to me, a web series was uploaded to YouTube by the name of Marble Hornets. The series documented the protagonist's encounter with the Slender Man. The reason I mention this series, created by Troy Wagner, Joseph DeLange, and Tim Sutton, is because this series is believed to be the first analog horror. I suggest you check it out for yourself because honestly, it still holds up. There are some moments where it's a little iffy, but in terms of horror in general, I'd say it's still pretty good. It still holds up to today's standards. Either way, if you do take the time to check it out, even just a few entries, honestly, even just the first entry, it's amazing how many analog horror aspects evolved from this series. It eventually grew in popularity and started creating the mythos around the Slender Man, also known as the Operator. It would also serve as the inspiration as to what Slender Man would eventually become. The sigil that belongs to Slender Man originated here. The pages, his ability to manipulate technology, and other characteristic abilities all evolved from Marble Hornets. This series just inspired creators to further flesh out the media in which Slender Man was involved in. This is when the original creepypasta exploded in popularity and became an almost overnight sensation. That is also when an individual known as Mark Hadley became an avid fan of the series. So much so that he took the time to learn the Unity engine to create one of his first games, Slender, the 8 Pages. All of these creations fueling the beginning of what I call the horror generation. The advent of Slender Man and his accompanying media fueled the next generation of horror lovers in a beautiful cacophony of opportunities. Creepypastas provided a way for young readers to get their fix online. Scary, compelling stories that allowed them to satisfy that horror itch while also giving them the opportunity to participate in this community through uploading the stories of their own. This community eventually blossomed into a cornucopia of terrifying entries, which would be many people's first introduction into horror. Even if you weren't the biggest fan of reading, there was so much visual media that you can use to indulge yourself inside the culture of internet horror. This is where Let's Plays and video series such as Marble Hornets filled the gap. Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, all these entertaining Let's Players of the time provided a nice entry point into the world of Slender Man and horror in general. No matter what your poison was, Slender Man was everywhere, and with most things, people got tired of it. But this boredom is where creativity thrives, and for these YouTubers, this would serve as the first viral push into internet popularity. This would only be the beginning. As horror on the internet became more common, it reached a whole generation of children who grew up surfing the web. Whether you read, played, or watched, there was always something for you. You had so many things such as the SCP Foundation, r/No Sleep, or even scary games like FNAF or Poppy Playtime. I believe that these horror games were the most valuable in cultivating the culture in the beginning due to the fact that these served as easily digestible and entertaining ways to get into horror. I mean, we all remember what it was like staying up till 3 in the morning trying to watch MatPat figure out what the hell was going on in the FNAF series. What would be more influential would be the advent of analog horror. You now have a whole generation growing up with horror influences. A whole generation that is inspired. Analog horror is a subset of horror on the internet made to mimic found footage techniques such as VHS tapes, emergency broadcasts, etc., etc. Some of the more notable series that come to mind when I mention this is Vita Carnis, The Backrooms, The Mandela Catalog, just to name a few. The first entry into this new genre, or what many believe was the revitalization of this genre, was on Halloween 2017 with a series called Local 58. This was only the first wave of new age horror on YouTube. And I mean, it was only the natural progression, considering that a lot of pre-2016 horror focused on a lot of ARGs, hidden websites, secret messages. This was the birth child of the horror generation finally experimenting with their own artworks, and it only improved from there. Most analog horrors around this time were mostly digital, with the scares being more unnerving than anything. That was until they started using IRL footage and Blender to make these fleshed out worlds. These fresh ideas being explored in these new mediums brought horror to everyone's computer screens for absolutely free. Because of the creativity and the accessibility to these works of art, people rightfully became obsessed. They theorized, they watched, and they grew hopeful for any new entry in the series that further explained the world that they decided to immerse themselves in. While analog horror has had an undisputed hand in crafting the current landscape, I want to go back a little bit to show how the horror generation and YouTube finally coalesced. It's hard to imagine the landscape that was pre-2018 YouTube if you weren't there to experience it. The best way to describe it was just people in their bedroom documenting their lives and their creative urges. You had skits, gameplay, how-tos, get ready with me's, makeup tutorials, anything that anybody wanted to put out into the world, they could do so through YouTube. I mean, back then there wasn't even a semblance of these large-scale productions and these fancy editing techniques that people use nowadays. This was the age of Fred, Smosh, Let's Plays, amateurs building and honing their skills with an audience supporting them. And they found success. They were building a brand that both adults and children loved. This was also the time that Hollywood saw an opportunity to capitalize on those audiences. Fred was the first one to trailblaze this new frontier. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Fred, also known as Lucas Cruikshank, was a comedy YouTuber who uploaded his first video on October 30th, 2006. His videos followed a young teenager named Fred going through the trials and tribulations of boyhood. Babysitters, moms, and bullies were constant topics in his videos, narrated by the high-pitched teenager. He became as much as a household name that anybody could be on the internet at the time, and a Nickelodeon executive saw his potential. That's why in 2010, Nickelodeon released Fred the Movie. Yes, I know, very creative title. This movie was a direct-to-video adaptation of the Fred character for the medium-sized screens all inside of our homes. What happened next was truly unbelievable. Or maybe it wasn't. It absolutely flopped. Literally 0% Rotten Tomatoes, one of the only movies to ever get this type of rating. Honestly, critics hated it so bad, I just kind of want to share one of the reviews that I saw. This review reads, "The film's a 12A because it contains behavior that would be dangerous if copied." Quite right, too. If I ever seen anyone acting like Fred, I'd probably lose a shotgun off at them. Very calm, very appropriate reaction, but I think this encapsulates how adults felt about the movie. But what about the audience that it was made for? Children. I don't know what to tell you, but this movie went triple platinum in my household personally, and in basically the entirety of my schools at the time. It got to the point where our school actually put a ban on Fred impressions during lunch, and as a person who works with kids now, honestly, don't blame them. But I guess the first movie must have done well with their target audience, because Nickelodeon further on released Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred, and Fred 3, Camp Fred. Before this, a YouTuber, let alone an internet personality, having their own big screen film was unheard of. The Fred movies, however you may feel about them, was a proof of concept. These people that had been recording in their bedrooms saw that they had the possibility to break into the mainstream. Another example of this would be the sketch group Smosh. In 2015, the group released a movie developed by Awesomeness Films, which is a throwback if you have ball knowledge, titled Smosh the Movie. It was a failure. It received incredibly negative reviews and yet was another loss for the YouTube community. What was the issue that was happening here? These two standouts, alongside other YouTube movies, were consistently failing and being proven yet again that they should stay in their place. Just stick to what you're good at. Why try to break through? Then came Lights Out. Directed by David F. Sandberg, this was a movie about a paranormal entity that only showed itself whenever the lights were off. This movie had a critical success. On a budget of $4.9 million, the movie was able to gross over $148 million during its theatrical run. What started out as a short film released on YouTube in 2013 became a box office hit. All it took was one success to break open the floodgates. The next hit wouldn't come until 2022 when the YouTube duo known as Rocka Rocka, known for their short films, announced that they would be releasing a horror movie under the title Talk to Me. When the movie released, it broke the cycle set by its predecessors and succeeded. The movie generated $92 million of gross revenue against a $4.5 million budget. Then came Shelby Oaks by Tim Stuckman, Bring Her Back again by the Rocka Rocka Brothers, Iron Lung by Markiplier, which now brings us to the modern age, Backrooms by the 20-year-old director Kane Parsons, and Obsession by Curry Barker. Movies by YouTubers are succeeding, but why now? What makes these movies so different from the previous iterations? I have an idea as to why. With the original attempts of YouTube going Hollywood, a lot of creators tried to capitalize on what they were doing in minutes and turning it into a feature-length film. The Fred movie followed along Fred and the hijinks he got into. The Smosh movie was just a collection of different skits that could have been on YouTube. For the YouTube audience, this may have been awesome and amazing watch, but for the general audience, it was a bit off-putting and weird. Not necessarily an easy jumping point for a random to start watching. The movies of this current generation are different. These creators are bringing original, refreshing ideas to the big screen in an age of mindless reboots, sequels, and cash grabs. People finally have stories that make them want to go to the movie theaters. But why now? I also have a few theories for this. One of them being that the horror generation has grown up. We're all 20-somethings now with these horror influences that have been around since we were teens or teenagers. We have the ability to discern the good from the bad and to appreciate original work. Another theory that I have is that YouTube became more produced. We were able to gain a familiarity with somebody's work before they even went on a theatrical run. Curry Barker and Kay Parsons, for instance, already had their own established works on YouTube that were majorly successful. They were able to cultivate an audience on YouTube that knew that they had the ability to make something great. Their audience had a figure to rally behind, and when they eventually made their theatrical debuts, they showed out. And these points are only further proven by the fact that more than 87% of Gen Z has went to the movie theaters within the past 12 months, according to a poll on Fandango. Go back to 1999. A janky website, a camera found in the woods, and 3 young filmmakers who went missing. That website got 160 million visits from just people wanting to believe something. That's it. That's the whole thing. Not a script, not a studio, not any type of actor. Just people online wanting to believe in something scary enough for it to be real. Fast forward 20-something years later, and that thing still hasn't stopped. It just changed shape. It went from a website to a forum post to a YouTube channel to a kid in Blender with just hopes and dreams. And now we have Steven Spielberg, of all people, fighting with 10 other different studios to make an adaptation of the Mandela catalog. The same hunger that made the Blair Witch a phenomenon is that same hunger that's filling up theaters for backrooms and obsession. And maybe that's the real punchline here. Horror never needed Hollywood's permission. It's been building its own audience, its own stars, its own mythology in public for free for decades. Whether the industry was paying attention or not, it's forced to now. Which makes me ask a question. Why is there no horror movie category at the Oscars? A genre that shaped pop culture since the 90s that is continuing to prove that it can out-earn franchise blockbusters with a fraction of the budget. This genre is still being treated like the industry's guilty pleasure instead of the art form that it truly is. I don't think that lasts much longer. YouTube and horror are finally being taken serious while it's been building in the shadows. The shadows just went mainstream. Well, that's the end of the video. My name is HugoIsHorrible and I appreciate your time watching. If you have any ideas, comments, anything you want to share, you know where to put them. And until next time, peace.